To many people around the world, America is one of the greatest, if not the actual greatest nations on the face of the earth. Also, many people would not mind becoming American citizens. As a matter of fact, for some people, becoming an American citizen is a dream. This might not be bad. However, living in the United States is not as rosy as some people have assumed. To be comfortable in the U.S., the average person needs to make at least $233,000 annually. So Americans who make less than this a year might seem fine. However, the fact is that they are not comfortable. You see, it is one thing to be an American and another to be living the American dream. Of course, most people hope to live the American dream, but very few can afford it. One reason for this is the difficulty associated with accommodation. Americans' cost of living remains a massive headache, even as recession fears fade. The supply of housing is simply not keeping up with demand, which drives up prices, and the Federal Reserve's latest monetary policy report attributes that to both short and long-term factors. Since there are a good number of people in the United States who do not make enough to have actual financial security, lots of them have no choice but to live from paycheck to paycheck. If you think the only people who have to live this way in this country are low-income people, you have no idea what it is like to live in the United States. You see, as far as living from paycheck to paycheck is concerned, middle-income earners are victims too. But it doesn't end here. Shockingly, high-income earners are not left out. As far as financial security is concerned, many people in the United States feel like they might need to triple their earnings before feeling financially secure. This might be mind-blowing. However, more mind-blowing is the fact that more than 70% of Americans feel financially insecure because of what they earn. And it gets worse. A good number of people do not think they will ever get to the point where they feel financially secure. How bad is it? Things might look terrible. However, it is better than it was thought to be before the pandemic. Since the pandemic ended, there has been a level of improvement in the finances of many Americans. Their savings are higher and their debts are lower. This is good. Sadly, it is very far from the dream. The goal is to enjoy financial stability and job security, but it doesn't quite seem like many Americans see themselves getting stable financially. These folks still have lots of worries, and it appears secure retirements and job security are some of the most pronounced. At the moment, taking care of their basic needs and saving simultaneously are some of the biggest challenges facing Americans. The reason for this is the lifestyle of living from one paycheck to the next. This sounds terrible, but trust me, you most likely have no idea how bad it is. The American economy is growing, and this is good news. However, despite this obvious growth, Americans are struggling to pay for healthcare, housing, and food. This might seem strange. Interestingly, it is a fact. This might almost make it seem like many Americans do not earn. Sadly, that's not the case. Lots of Americans are gainfully employed. The unemployment rate is low. Regardless of this, many Americans still struggle to meet their basic needs. You may struggle with your finances and are worried. Well, you should be worried. But one thing you must know is that there are many people in America, just like you, who struggle with their finances. But what is the reason for this struggle? We will find out in a moment, but in the meantime, kindly hit the like and share buttons. Also, please subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Why do Americans struggle with their finances? It is one thing to know about the struggles Americans have with their finances, and another to know why they are having these struggles. But it doesn't end here. What can be done about these struggles? Well, the easiest way to offer a solution to the financial struggles of the average American is to have an understanding of average earnings. On average, an American is expected to make about $4,400 monthly, but this isn't what they end up going home with. This income in itself isn't exactly a lot, but it's interesting how most Americans only go home with about 75% of that salary. Benefits and taxes are taken out. What is left of $4,400 might not seem small for folks in other parts of the world. However, to live well in the United States, one will need more. This was perhaps not the case before now. However, with the increase in the cost of living, healthcare, etc., and most people not experiencing an increase in their incomes, it has become quite a struggle to survive in the United States. How are Americans coping? The average American has not found a perfect way to cope with the challenges associated with living in the United States. However, for some reason, they seem to have found a way to deal with the housing crisis. This might not seem like something everyone can do, however, it seems to be working for some people. You see, the cost of housing might be high all over the United States. However, it is higher in some regions. Due to this, some folks feel the best way to deal with the housing challenges they are facing is to migrate from areas like New York and San Francisco that are considered very expensive to areas in Alabama that are relatively cheaper. This might be questionable, however, you really can't blame these folks, as a lot of people feel they need to have at least $1 million in assets before they can live comfortably in certain parts of the United States without having to deal with financial insecurity. In the United States, there has been an increase in the cost of housing, food, healthcare, car insurance, etc. This price increase is bad. Sadly, it is not a one-time thing. Due to this, it has become almost impossible for a lot of Americans to save. That's not all. Many Americans do not have enough funds to enjoy their wants. They are only able to meet their needs, and this is not how they imagined their lives would turn out. Well, in the absence of the right income, it seems lots of people are turning to credit cards. This is not the first time Americans are using credit cards. However, credit card debts have never been this high. They have gotten as high as $1 trillion. This is amazingly high, and it is an indication of how bad things are. What is the worst crisis Americans are dealing with? Right now, so long as finance is involved, Americans are dealing with many crises. However, in all of these crises, it appears the most significant is the housing crisis. The housing challenge might not be the most pressing one Americans are facing. However, it is generally considered the most pressing. The reason for this is obvious. Having a roof over one's head is not something that can be negotiated. Everyone knows this. Regardless of this knowledge, in the face of declining wages, the cost of housing has significantly increased. If you have always experienced an increase in your earnings, you might struggle to understand what lots of people with stagnant wages have to deal with in the face of a rent increase. Not everyone understands why there is a rent increase, and due to this, the best they can do is complain. Well, complaining will not change a thing. Instead of complaining, it is important to know why there is a steady increase in the cost of housing. So it might be easy to blame the increase in the cost of rent on government policies. But beyond government policies, there are other key reasons for the increase in the cost of rent. One of them is the rapid growth and development of neighborhoods. Right now, not everyone realizes this. But the development of neighborhoods, which is considered great, comes at a price. With development comes a rent increase. This is because the growth of a neighborhood leads to an increase in the value of properties. When this happens, folks who have just moved into the neighborhood might have no problem with the cost of housing. Unfortunately, it is not the same for families that have lived in the neighborhood for a long time without experiencing a significant increase in income. Such families have no choice but to pay, regardless of this rent increase. Well, those who have no means to deal with the increase end up leaving the neighborhood against their will. It might seem smart to move out of a neighborhood when one is unable to afford rent. However, doing this can lead to instability. The instability associated with the increase in the cost of rent might seem like something that affects just families, but that's not the case. It can affect an entire community. Development is not the only reason for the housing crisis. Demand and supply also play a role. In the short term, higher interest rates and tighter underwriting by banks significantly increased builders' costs of financing, discouraging new construction. In the long term, despite a surge in construction in late 2020 and 2021, it appears that a variety of factors, including zoning and other regulatory hurdles, have prevented construction from keeping up with the underlying demand, resulting in a gross housing vacancy rate that is at a historical low. Speaking of the housing crisis to senators, Powell said, "I think two things are going on. One is a longer-term housing shortage, and the other is the pandemic effects and the associated higher interest rates, which are things that will pass through when all that passes through and rates are normalized. How can the American middle class do better? The housing crisis in the United States is a big deal. However, not everyone is aware of the factors that affect hiring. Right now, since development affects the value of real estate, ultimately affecting housing, the best middle-class families can do is have an understanding of the rent crisis. With this, making the right decisions becomes a lot easier. Also, getting armed with the latest info on the rent crisis can help folks in the middle class have meaningful conversations with their representatives at various levels of government. This might not be a solution. However, it can come in handy at the beginning of a response to this crisis. What has Biden done? Although the housing crisis among the middle class is still intense, the government of the United States is working hard on a solution. President Biden's call for Congress to tackle the urgent matter of housing affordability through tax credits, down payment assistance initiatives, and other measures is warranted and represents a crucial step in easing the burden of high rents and home prices. Biden might be working hard. However, it might take a while for the results of his actions to become obvious. Americans have to bear this in mind and exercise a lot of patience. Hopefully, things turn out right. That's how far we can go for now. So do you see any change taking place? Will the American middle class make it through this trying time? Or will the middle class become history? Well, time will tell. But what do you think? Kindly tell us in the comment section below.